wind that whispers through the willow trees, sun that sustains us, water that washes over willing earth and weathered stones, a smile shared and savored, a child's squeal of delight as she dances in the daisies and daffodils, the quiet joy of gathered community. This is the spirit of life and love that we call forth now into this gathering. May this spirit infuse our hearts, fill our souls, and carry us forward like a wave on the ocean as we enter now into this sacred time and space. And now we'll have a time to light our candles of community. You can light a candle for a joy or a concern, or simply to bring more light into this space.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they asked what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they asked what I did well, tell them I said yes to love. Tell them I said yes to love.
Let us stand in body or spirit for the lighting of the chalice. Why a flaming chalice, the question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer, a cup of blessings overflowing, a cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst, a cup of wine for celebration and dedication. The flame of truth, the fire of purification, oil for anointing, healing. Out of chaos, fear, and horror, thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us in these days of uncertainty, sorrow, and rage, and a light to warm our souls and guide us home. Let us join together in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. Our opening thought this morning comes from John F. Kennedy from his remarks on the 20th anniversary of the Voice of America to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare in 1962. These are aspirational words, if not necessarily a correct description of what happens in the United States. He said, "We are not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people."
From the crush of wealth and power, something broken in us all. Waits the Spirit's silent hour, pleading with a poignant call. Bind all my wounds again. Even now our hearts are weary of the friend we need so much. When I see the pain you carry, shall I with a gentle touch bind all your wounds again? When our love for one another makes our burdens light to bear, find the sister and the brother hungry for the feast we share. Bind all their wounds again. Every time our spirits languish, terrified to draw too near, may we know each other's anguish, and with love that casts out fear, bind all our wounds again.
Our first reading comes to us from Timothy Snyder and his work on tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. A nationalist encourages us to be our worst and then tells us that we are the best. A nationalist, although endlessly brooding on power, victory, defeat, revenge, wrote Orwell, tends to be uninterested in what happens in the real world. Nationalism is relativist, since the only truth is the resentment we feel when we contemplate others. As the novelist Danilo Keys put it, nationalism has no universal values, aesthetic or ethical. A patriot, by contrast, wants the nation to live up to its ideals, which means asking us to be our best selves. A patriot must be concerned with the real world, which is the only place where their country can be loved and sustained. A patriot has universal values, standards by which they judge their nation, always wishing it well and wishing that it would do better. Our meditation this morning is a poem by Langston Hughes titled Democracy. Let us hear these words in an attitude of meditation. Democracy will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, "Let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day." I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want freedom just as you.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole.
Our second reading this morning comes as a reminder that democracy in the United States has not always, or perhaps ever, included all persons equally. The reading is from Malcolm X, called "I Have a Nightmare." And when I speak, I don't speak as a Democrat or a Republican, nor an American. I speak as a victim of America's so-called democracy. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. The primary global geopolitical conflict of our time today is not between capitalism and communism. As I was growing up in the Cold War, that was the fight, that was the battle that was laid out for us, a Cold War between capitalism and communism. But today, the global conflict is primarily between democracy and autocracy. And for the past 2 decades, autocracy has been winning. By all measurements, democracy has been on the decline globally during the 21st century, especially in the largest democracies of the world. Anne Applebaum, who's one of the world's most respected experts on the global threat of autocracy, attributes this decline to the success of global autocratic networks that have systematically worked to weaken democratic institutions and structures around the world for their own maintenance and expansion of political and economic power. Applebaum writes, quote, "Nowadays, autocracies are run not by one bad guy, but by networks composed of kleptocratic financial structures, security services, military, police, paramilitary groups, surveillance personnel, and professional propagandists. The members of these networks are connected not only within a given country, but among many countries. The corrupt, state-controlled companies in one dictatorship do business with their counterparts in another, with profits going to the leader and his inner circle. Oligarchs from multiple countries all use the same accountants and lawyers to hide their money in Europe and America. The police forces in one country can arm, equip, and train the police forces in another. China notoriously sells surveillance technology all around the world. Propagandists share resources and tactics. The Russian troll farms that promote Putin's propaganda can also be used to promote propaganda of Belarus or Venezuela. They also pound home the same messages about the weakness of democracy and the evil of America. Chinese sources are right now echoing fake Russian stories about non-existent Ukrainian chemical weapons. Their goal is to launch false narratives and confuse audiences in the United States and other free societies. They do so in order to make us believe that there is nothing we can do in response, end quote. This morning, I'm reflecting on the question, what do we need to do in response to this worldwide autocratic challenge to democracy? And first, I would say we must recognize what it is that makes our democracies so vulnerable to decline. In our context, in the United States, it is especially critical and important to recognize that religious and racially based nationalism is an enemy of democracy. It always has been, and it always will be. And the world's 2 largest democracies, India and the United States, are in deep peril because of this religious nationalism. The flames of religious nationalism that have been fanned by Trump in the United States and by Modi in India are deep threats to a flourishing democracy in both of these countries. In 2016, the United States lost its status as a full democracy according to the Democracy Index, which looks at 60 different factors relating to the health of a democracy. And in 2016, we became classified as a flawed democracy. The index currently ranks the United States a country that we often see as being the light of democracy in the world, on a hill for others to see. The index currently ranks the United States as the 26th most democratic country in the world. The peril for democracy is also affecting other countries as well. Turkey and Hungary are two examples of countries that were not long ago touted as democracy success stories, but now they have become democracies in name only over just the last decade. It is critical that we recognize the economic and political factors that are a threat to a vibrant democracy. A large wealth gap between the rich and the poor weakens democracy. It's not an accident that Russia's attempts at democracy were weakened and ultimately failed as its kleptocratic oligarchy flourished. It is not an accident that democracy is weakening in the United States as the gap between the rich and the poor widens. It's also critical that we become more fully aware of the work that's being done by the autocratic networks that Applebaum mentions to undermine democracy around the world. It is in the interests of autocrats to weaken democracy everywhere, not only in their home countries, but also around the world, especially in democracies that are close to them, because they don't want an example of a democracy working next door. Democracies must be vigilant in responding to these attacks. Sometimes the attacks against democracy are violent, as we see in Hong Kong. Sometimes they are brutally violent and deadly, as in what Russia is doing in Ukraine. And sometimes they are more subtle, as in the attempts to influence global opinion against democracy and to sow discord among people living in democracies. And we only have to turn to social media to see these attempts to sow discord among us living in this flawed democracy of the United States. We have seen that propaganda is the tool by which autocrats control the minds and actions of their populace, and by which they attempt to weaken democracy globally. When propaganda does not work, prisons, sometimes poison, violence, and even war are also options. This is not to say that democracies don't also use propaganda, and sometimes for very pernicious purposes, but it's important to be aware how it's being used by autocracies around the world. To address the assault on global democracy, the democracies of the world must be just as committed to supporting each other as the autocracies are committed to supporting each other. This requires us to learn from each other and also to be cognizant of what strengthens our democratic institutions. Here in the United States, instead of making bold claims that our country is the best in the world, we ought to humbly learn from countries whose democracies are proving to be more robust than our own. Back to the Democracy Index, the one that ranks the United States 26th in the world among democracies. The 10 strongest democracies in the world, according to the Democracy Index, are the following. Number 1, Norway. Number 2, New Zealand. Number 3, Finland. Number 4, Sweden. Number 5, Iceland. Number 6, Denmark. Number 7, Ireland. Number 8, Taiwan. And then there's a tie for number 9 between Australia and Switzerland. Canada, by the way, is 12. The United States, again, is 26. It's, I think, important to note a few things. The strongest democracies of the world are all what we call social democracies. They are social democracies, and they share the following characteristics. The most healthy democracies in the world cultivate equality of opportunity for their citizens through their systems and practices. The strongest democracies in the world have progressive tax systems rather than regressive tax systems that exacerbate wealth inequality. The strongest democracies in the world have criminal justice systems that focus more on restorative justice rather than retributive justice, and none of them practices capital punishment. According to the World Press Freedom Index, the strongest democracies in the world have the most robust laws and systems protecting the freedom of the press. According to Transparency International, the strongest democracies of the world have strict limitations in relation to the role of money in politics, and they regulate and create restrictions on corporate influence on political processes. The world's strongest democracies have systems that prevent gerrymandering that leads to the unjust weakening of political power of persons and groups of persons and the possibility of establishing permanent minority rule. Many of them have proportional systems of representation rather than winner-take-all elections. The world's strongest democracies have systems that prevent the suppression of their people's right to vote and their people's access to voting. According to the World Health Organization, the world's strongest democracies of the world have the most equitable access to quality health care. According to the World Economic Forum and the Council of Foreign Relations, the strongest democracies of the world are the least sexist in relation to the distribution of economic and political power, and they also have the smallest gender gaps in relation to pay. According to the Global Citizens for Human Rights, the strongest democracies in the world have the best systems of public education. According to the Corruption Perception Index published by Transparency International, the strongest democracies in the world are by far the least corrupt countries in the world. The strongest democracies of the world are also the most committed to ecological sustainability and to addressing the climate crisis with the urgency it requires, because the strongest democracies in the world recognize and understand that healthy ecosystems and a livable climate are in the best interest of all of their people. And according to the World Happiness Report, the strongest democracies in the world are consistently the countries with the happiest people. So here in the United States, if we could let go of the myth of American exceptionalism and humbly seek to improve ourselves, we would quickly see that we have much to learn from democracies that have proven to be more vibrant and more robust than our own. And by learning from them, we would soon find out that we also have much to gain from learning from them. By becoming a full democracy rather than a flawed democracy, we would become happier, healthier, better educated, less corrupt, more equitable, more participatory, more just, and also more peaceful as a nation. Perhaps the very best way that the United States can lead in this effort to win the global conflict between democracy and autocracy is by doing everything in our power to strengthen our own democracy and become a model for how democracy contributes to sustainable human flourishing. Perhaps the best way to defeat the autocratic networks of the world is to show the world how well democracy works by doing all in our power to regain our status as a full democracy rather than a flawed democracy. May we make it so together. At this time, we will have an opportunity for giving, and those who wish may bring their gifts to the table or donate on the homepage of the church app. Stand in body or spirit for the closing thought and the extinguishing of the chalice. Our parting thought comes from Reinhold Niebuhr. He writes, "Our capacity for justice makes democracy possible, but our inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary." Let us join together in the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.